Welcome back to another episode of AWS Partners Unplugged. I'm your host, Igor, and today we're diving into a game-changing feature for anyone on AWS Partner Network looking to smooth out their customer onboarding. Joining me today is Welly Siauw, a Principal Partner Solutions Architect here at AWS. Welly, great to have you on the show.
Igor, good to see you again. Thanks for having me. Super excited to talk about this. I've been working on this for many years, and we've been talking about this in many of our conversations. So looking forward to share it with the larger audience.
Awesome. So let's start with the basics. What exactly is IAM Temporary Delegation? That's the name of the feature. And why should partners be paying attention to it?
I think before I answer what is IAM Temporary Delegations, the best way to kind of explain this is why we built this feature. And you're working with partners, especially SaaS partners. Typically, there's onboarding part of your product in the customer accounts. You have to set up certain resources and etc. But there's also like day two operations, like something changed, feature updated, you have to update the role, you have to create a new resources and etc. And a lot of times we spend a lot of this cycle with the customers going through the onboarding documents and reading the documentations, clicking between the console, maybe deploying some script, Terraform templates, CloudFormation template, you name it, right? And oftentimes we see there's a lot of frictions in this particular space. So we ask ourselves, like, where is this friction coming from and where can we help? And this is why we have the IAM Temporary Delegations. The idea in here is that we give partners who understand like how to deploy the product and feature a temporary and limited permission that they requested on the customer accounts. So customers will have control to see the request, they can approve it, and then customer have this temporary STS IAM credential that they can use to deploy resources, perform the setup, and etc. And then after it's done, these particular permissions will be expired. And then if customers change their mind, they can also reject and then revoke the access, and everything will be recorded in the CloudTrail as well. That's why the name temporary delegation, because you delegate your permission temporarily so that the expert can actually do the setup.
So in the past, I guess we had intensive documentation telling customers what to do step by step, right? And now, is it fair to say that this is going to be a one-click experience? And
Yes.
how does it actually work from a customer perspective? What is their experience?
You're right. We cannot think about this. It's like, imagine like, is that a one-click experience for the customers, right? Partner console, for example, you just sign up for a partner product. You are in the console and there's one giant button to say deploy to AWS, for example. So now they click on that button and they maybe give an options like you want to do traditional way, here's click on reading our documentations. You want to use your CloudFormation template, here's the link to download the CloudFormations. Or we also suggest a new button in here to say deploy with IAM Temporary Delegations. The customer click on it. As a partners, you maybe ask for one or two additional items like, hey, what's the bucket name you want to connect to? Or maybe like, hey, how do we should name this role name, etc. Like it really depends on your product, right? You can ask a couple wizard questions on those. And then at the end of that wizard, you basically let the customers click a button. When they click that button, partner will be redirected to the IAM console. So from the partner console, you redirect it to the IAM console. Now, in this IAM console, you're going to see this pop-up. And this pop-up basically say, partner X is requesting temporary delegation, and then we give the actual, like a human-readable list of the permissions. Now, and we do this using generative AI, of course, right? We know what the permission the partner requested, and then you can just translate it to human plain language. But in case you are the person who wants to go nitty-gritty details, you can click a button. There's still a JSON of the actual permission itself. And from here, you as a customer, you can approve or you can delegate. For example, say, hey, I don't have full admin access. I want to have my admin team to approve this. You can do that as well. Or if you have the permission, you can just go ahead and approve it. And depending whether you are asking the admin to approve it or you approve it yourself, right? At the end of that cycle, then IAM will actually send a token back to the partners. And partners use this to exchange with the IAM credentials. And then while that happens, you just sit, you can wait on the screen, everything will kind of happen magically. So it's almost like that one-click experience, essentially, right? There may be one or two more clicks, depending on like how complex the product, maybe ask a couple more questions. But in some cases, it's just literally one-click experience.
Actually, I want to double click on this one-click experience. So, is it fair to say that this complexity of onboarding is being reduced here? Because in the past, complexity was limited by a single person reading all the instructions. What is the complexity limitation now, if there is a complexity limitation at all?
We are hiding those complexity, right? So now the partners actually the one who orchestrate a lot of this deployment itself based on your input. So rather than asking you to navigate through multiple documentations, right? And like IAM documentation or other service documentation sometimes change, right? You have your documentation and partner product linked to our documentation, and suddenly everything changed, like console, screenshot change, and everything else. So we say, yes, let's remove that complexity of actually doing the deployment, because the idea in here is that there are different other complexity where the customer input is actually matter. For example, if it's data and analytic product, right? The person who using those product, they want some certain complexity of the feature related to data analytics, but they might not be the person who has the understanding of reading IAM documents, CloudFormation document, etc. What they want is a best practice from the partners that can be implemented in like almost one-click experience.
So is it fair to say then before customers had to read permissions, understand what needs to change, and then perform that change? Now they only review the permission and the partner then changes everything, right?
Yes. So partners now has the this temporary permissions that is granted based on the customers to perform those actions. The way partner do that, they can make an API call directly using that credentials. Others sometimes like deploying a custom CloudFormation template with like a more fine greater details, right? And what we also recommend for partners that using this feature is to kind of give maybe like a short paragraph to say, hey, this is why I'm requesting the access. This is the feature that you are onboarded, and etc., etc.
So the complexity of the actions actually is limited basically by partner's imagination. It's whatever is in that CloudFormation. If custom authorized, it will be performed.
Yeah. So let me talk a little bit about like patterns that we're seeing in here, right? So at high level, we talk what is IAM Temporary Delegation is the way for you as the customers to delegate permission to partners to complete setup in your account, right? Now, what we've seen partners is using this feature in many iterations. One is like what I mentioned earlier, like just have some sort of like a level admin approval. Like you may be talking with data analytic team, they don't have permissions, like they will not have the permission even if they read your documentation, right? They have to send that documentation to their admin team. And now you have the admin teams that, okay, what is this? I'm not sure what is, say, pick a name of the product, Databricks, MongoDB, and etc. They have no idea what is this, but they've been asked to deploy a bunch of this stuff, right? Now, using this admin approval, basically you can say, I'm going to ask the admin to approve it because we purchased this partner product. But then how the implementation is going to be done by the partner itself. That's pattern number one. The second pattern that I'm super excited is like, you may be working with partner product where you couldn't deploy resources until you know other informations, such as what's the VPC we need to deploy this cluster, right? Or maybe what's the EKS cluster ID and something else, right? A lot of times this is like, oh yeah, go and figure out what's the cluster name and etc. in your documentations. With this temporary delegation, you can create two patterns. The first pattern is that you request, as a partner, you request for read-only access. And what you do with that read-only access is that you do discovery of the customer environment, right? So you can say, all right, I'm seeing 2 VPC, 3 EKS cluster, and etc. And then you can create this wizard to say, all right, customers, this is all the VPC I'm seeing. This is all the cluster. I suggest we do X, Y, and Z. Customers say, yep, let's deploy on that VPC, this cluster, etc. And then you are requesting for the second temporary delegation. And this time you are using that to actually doing the deployment. So you have read-only, and then you have the like a write access as the secondary pattern. So that's a very interesting, and we start talking with many partners and say, oh, this is great. Now we can do like very tailored onboarding without, putting too much pressure on the customer itself, right? Because typically when you're gonna do this kind of like custom onboarding, and I used to work before AWS, I used to do this. Like I sit with the customers when we have like 2 hours discovery call, basically show me your VPC. Oh yeah, that's a VPC. Okay, now copy that VPC ID and all of that, right? Those multi-hours can be just compressed into like a couple minutes of deployment.
These are awesome patterns. I think it's important for partners to know. But I want to pivot a little bit about security, right? Security is always a top of mind for our customers. And you did mention temporary access. How do we ensure that the customers maintain control during this process?
Yeah, so customers have full control. Like partner can request for permissions, but that permission is not automatically granted, right? So the first gate will be you as a customers, you are going to approve, reject, or delegate it to your admin. So that's one part. The second part, everything will be recorded in CloudTrail for audit purposes. This is very, very important, right? We need to know who is this person, what they approve, what's the partner is doing, and what our action is, right? So that's the second part. The third part is that there's this kind of like a break glass situation. You can revoke access, like say like give permission to partners, and then you within that deployment setup, you change your mind and you can revoke that access. And you can do that as well through API, CLI, or in the console itself to basically revoke the access. And then the nature of these temporary delegations is also means like we are time bound. Like when partner requests, they have to specify, are you going to use this for like 1 hour, 2 hours, or like say maximum 12 hours, for example, right? So that there's a time bound limit on how much permission they requested. The last one I think is important because sometimes we've seen, I'm not saying it's a bad practice, it's just like the way the workaround is that partners requested you to create an IAM role with many permissions. And then oftentimes 50% of that permission is only using once during the initial onboarding, right? But now you have an IAM role sitting in your account that can be assumable by the partners that has, maybe like more than permission that is actually required for day to day. Because we are using these temporary delegations, it means the partner can actually string the role that they use for the deployment, right? Because they're going to use the rest of the permission just once during the implementations. And then the day-to-day activity is going to use the regular IAM role with like a more limited permissions.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than orphan permissions and orphan roles sitting out there.
One thing to mention, I forgot to mention, like even though we are, this temporary delegation can be used to create an IAM role, right? Partner can create an IAM role that's going to use for day-to-day activities. And I think this is also important to say is like, this is not replacing IAM role, right? You will have solid use case where you actually want to use IAM role for your day-to-day operations if you are partners in the customer account, and you should continue to do that. And you can create this IAM role using these temporary delegations. And the way we ensure that from the security of the customers is that we ensure that you are not going beyond the permissions that you requested, is that we attach automatically a permission boundary. This is an IAM role concept. If you're not familiar with it, you can read about it. It's basically saying, here's the maximum boundary you as a partners can do in this account, right? And this is part of the review that we do with the partners when they requested to onboard to this feature. So we review what is the permission boundary that they requested.
And I know we said temporary. I want to throw a curveball at you. What if partner needs to maintain access for ongoing operations, like reading from an S3 bucket long after the initial setup?
I like that, Igor. I think that you going to like maybe the third part then we haven't talked about, which is like a day two operations, right? Oftentimes AWS launches a new feature and then you want to have that feature in your partner product itself. And for that, you need to make some updates. Like you need to either update the IAM role that was deployed in customer account a year ago, or maybe like update certain attributes in the resources that you deploy like 6 months ago, right? Even though most of the discussion we have today is on onboarding part, but actually you can use IAM Temporary Delegation for those day too, right? For example, you know that you are about to update the IAM policy for your product. And then in your partner product console, you can create an experience to say like notify the customers basically, hey, we have an update. Do you want to auto update yes or no? If you click yes, it will actually pop up again, another IAM temporary delegation. So you see the same IAM console that they see when they onboarded, say, a couple months ago. But this time there's a different request. Like the request is say we are going to update the permissions to include X, Y, and Z, approve yes and no, and boom. Like based on that, you can continuously update the permissions. The key here will be, of course, is that the customers still take the final call, like they approve or deny that requested. But now instead of you relying on like newsletter, update in your documentation page and etc., you can be more proactive in your user experience to say, I detect that you're using an old IAM role. I have a new one. Do you want me to, complete that setup using temporary delegations?
That sounds like a win-win for both partners and customers. But what about large organizations where the person using partner software might not have the rights to grant these permissions?
So this is where we talk about, some admin permissions, right? So you might be a data scientist that wants to use partner product, but you're actually not having full admin permission to create an IAM role, because as a day-to-day activity, you don't need to create an IAM role, right? But you need to analyze data in S3 buckets. For these kind of use cases, when you receive this permission request from the partners, as the user, you prompted to this console, right? You can click on delegate admin. And then what that does is that allows you to put some kind of text to say, hey, admin, I need to use this because we purchased partner X product, and et cetera, et cetera. And then the admin can see this request and they can actually approve or deny it, basically. And that means like when that happens, right, the admin will grant part of their permission. So again, when you request a permissions, and then only that particular subset of permission will be granted to the partners. And then what you can do is that as an admin, after you approve it, then the end users will see, all right, the request is approved. I can come back to partner console and then continue to work, right? So we're seeing that as like a way for you to kind of like simplify, some of the communication you typically do between end user and the admin as well, right? Because there's a clear path of this is exactly the request. This is the permission that we requested. As an admin, I have one central place to see it, rather than maybe like going through like bunch of emails and bunch of links and documentation to kind of say, all right, what is actually you need, right? Now we can have a way to express what the customers need actually through that temporary delegations.
Sounds like we've thought through all of these scenarios and crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. If I were a partner, I would be interested, of course. So for partners listening, what are the technical requirements to start using this functionality?
Yeah, I think there's two parts, right? There's the technical requirements, as you mentioned, Igor, but there's also the business requirements. I'll talk about the technical requirement first. As you go through the onboarding process, you can look at some of the documentation in IAM. You just Google IAM Temporary Delegations, you're going to find it. Some of the technical requirements, such as like, what is the AWS account ID you as a partners, if you're a SaaS, right? What's the account ID that going to use for doing these temporary delegations? We need to know those because we need to allow listed that. We also need to know what the permission template you're going to use. Like what are the permission you're going to request on the customer accounts? And if you are creating an IAM role, we also need to know what is the permission boundary that needs to carry with that role. A lot of this is like something you can discuss with us as part of the IAM team later on when you do the onboarding. But before that, there's also prerequisites. Like we like the partner community, of course. We really want to kind of co-build with those partners, and some of those requirements, including like as part of the ISV Accelerate, right? This is a program where we work with the partners that lean in and do a co-sell with AWS. There's more on ISVA beyond this, but this is one of the benefit, because if you're part of the ISVA, you can use the IAM temporary delegations. The second business requirements is this is a product, right? The SaaS product. We want to work with the partners that have the product listed in AWS Marketplace with also this deploy an AWS batch. So this is like a two business requirements on top of the technical requirements that I mentioned earlier.
And then do we have any partners already using the product, something we can say publicly?
Oh yeah. So there's a blog post. There's a couple announcements. If folks following up the reInvent, for example, we have CrowdStrike, Databricks, we have Sentinel One, we have HashiCorps, Rapid7s, and a couple more names, right? There's a couple names right there. I have to come back to see the full list, and there's more growing, actually. Like we have a lot of partners express the interest going through the onboarding right now. And uniquely, I think I have to mention this as well, like this is also working for like a pan Amazon, I would say. Like if you may be familiar with other Amazon projects such as the Project Leo, right? That's the satellite communications, and they're using the same concept of IAM Temporary Delegations to allow their customers to create the IAM role, service role, like more effectively. So we have many types of partners, and we're really looking forward to see like maybe other use cases as well.
It really sounds like this is a new standard for partner customer experience and trust. And if a partner wants to get started today, what's their first move?
There's the integration guide that they can look at. So my simple suggestion, just Google IAM Temporary Delegations. It's going to land it on the user guide. There's a guide for the users, but also a guide for the partners. And from there on, they're going to download this like a questionnaire template, fill in informations, like as I mentioned earlier, right? Some of those technical requirements like the templates, the permission boundary, and etc., and then submit it to IAM. And then from there on, typically what happens is that we kick off a call to kind of like maybe uncover any additional ambiguity in the use cases, right? And then we allow the city accounts so they can start testing this using like some dummy permission template, like a very limited template, right? And then after that, they got the permission template finalized. It's going to be registered in as an ARN, like an Amazon resource number, like the actual ARN of the permission templates. And then they can start integrating this into the product as well.
Sounds great. I will include as many links as possible in the show notes. Welly, thanks for breaking this all down for us. It's clear that IAM Temporary Delegation is going to save people, partners, and customers a lot of time and money. Thank you for coming to the show.
Yeah, I'm super excited in this. Thanks, Igor, for the opportunity. You're right. I think this is a step in the right direction. Something we hear a lot of partners and customers asking. I also want to just extend this to other partners that are listening. We'd like to hear your use cases. Maybe there's other use cases that we haven't thought about. Please contact me. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Amazon as well. So thank you again.
Yeah, I will include your LinkedIn profile in the show notes as well. Be careful what you ask for. Thank you, everybody, who tuned in. And until next time.